She wiped a table, the rag moving in slow, practiced circles, watching the clock on the wall as if time could be persuaded to speed up. The morning rush had been merciless and the lunch crowd had left a trail of plates and half-drunk coffee cups. She moved with the quiet steadiness of someone who had learned to be invisible and useful at the same time. He had come in hours earlier, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, ordering the cheapest sandwich on the menu like he wanted to be forgotten. He kept to himself in the corner booth, stirring his tea with a calm that didn't belong to the hurried rhythm of the diner. No one suspected anything. No one ever did. Something about the way he watched the room made her pause. Maybe it was the precision of his eyes, the way he noticed spilled salt and a crooked napkin without a word. She smiled at him once when their eyes met over a muddy cup of coffee. He returned the smile with something almost like relief. She had been here 3 years, ever since she moved back to the city to be closer to her mother. The job paid enough for rent and groceries but not for mistakes. She showed up early, stayed late, and learned to laugh when customers made jokes that cut deeper than tips. Her uniform hummed with grease and hope. That day, a manager she'd learned to respect in small gestures, a nod for staying through double shifts, a hand on the shoulder during a sad phone call, walked past her and whispered an instruction she didn't expect. There was a problem with the register, he said. They needed someone to stay while he sorted the books. He trusted her and she felt seen in a way that made her chest ache. She agreed. The lunch rush faded, the sun moved and shadows lengthened, and the man in the corner paid his bill and left without fanfare. She was folding napkins when the door chimed and 2 suited men stepped in. Their shoes shone. Their suits were perfect. They sat at the counter and ordered with the kind of entitlement that used to make her chest tighten. A fight broke out near the back booth. Voices rose, things were knocked over, and a plate shattered like an exclamation. One of the suited men stood, chest heaving, and accused a young kid of stealing. The kid swore he hadn't. The suited man reached for the kid's jacket and the kid pushed back. She saw the fear in the kid's eyes, the way someone smaller looks at a grown person and recognizes all the reasons the world might not be fair. Without thinking, she stepped between them. Her voice was steady, the way the sea is steady before it swallows a pier. "Hey," she said, "calm down. We don't need this here." That one word changed everything. The suited man sneered. He called her a name that landed like a slap. The kid's hands trembled. The other customers watched, some with amusement, others with the practiced indifference of people who had learned not to get involved. She kept talking, her tone low and firm, and slowly the heat in the room cooled. She had a way of making people listen. Maybe it was the authority she borrowed from years of having none. She offered a free slice of pie, a discount, anything to keep the peace and keep the day moving. In the end, the manager returned to find 2 men paid up and gone, a kid still wide-eyed at the counter, and her standing with a napkin in her hand and a bruise forming as a souvenir under her collarbone where the suited man had shoved her. That evening, when the manager closed the register and locked the door, he seemed distracted. He pulled her aside and told her the conversation would be with human resources the next day. He used words like protocol and complaint. She stood there, heart thudding, and thought of the life she'd built around small kindnesses. She had never meant for anyone to be fired. She had only wanted to stop a fight. The next morning arrived with a storm. Rain rimmed the windows and the diner smelled of coffee and something metallic. She came in, sleeves rolled, chopstick scar along the knuckle from a baking mishap years back, hair braided the same way her grandmother used to do. The manager waited with a folder that felt heavier than the paycheck. He apologized, said the owner had to make a statement, and then the words she dreaded came out: terminated, effective immediately. She laughed at first because laughter is a defense mechanism that feels like armor. Then she packed her things with hands that shook and walked out into the rain. The regulars watched, a few called out a sympathetic word, and some tossed coins into a paper cup the way families toss breadcrumbs to birds. She kept her chin up. She had been fired before. She would find something else. The owner of the diner, she later found out, was a man named Garrett Price, an owner of several properties, a philanthropist in the headlines, and addicted to the idea that his businesses ran like clockwork. He was arrogant in a way that respected nothing but the bottom line. No one saw him in person much. He preferred numbers to faces. What she did not know then was that the man with the sunglasses, the one in the corner the day before, was not a customer at all. He had been watching, yes, but not for the coffee stains or the crooked napkins. He had been watching to see how the staff treated the people no one else wanted to notice. He was an undercover inspector, though he refused the title. He liked to call himself a seeker of truth. After she left, the undercover man returned to his car and made a call. The words were crisp and clipped. Someone in his voice suggested authority, Someone else suggested tenderness. He told a woman on the other end that he had seen a young waitress act with courage and decency in a way that made him certain he'd found what he was looking for. In the weeks that followed, rumors grew like dandelion seeds. She heard whispers that the owner had been angry about something, that someone had to be made an example of. She heard that Garrett Price was about to open a new restaurant downtown and that investors liked their systems clean and uncomplicated. Her name became a footnote in a story about payroll and procedure. She kept moving forward. She took temp work, she waited tables at a different place, she mopped floors with new sneakers on her feet. She sent money home and she smiled at her mother, who would ask how things were and then change the subject because some things felt too heavy to say out loud. One afternoon, months later, a glossy envelope arrived at her apartment. It had no return address, only her name in a careful type. Inside was an invitation to a hearing, a polite request to come and speak about a recent change in management practices at Garrett Price's establishments. The undercover inspector's name was on the sender line, but no one explained why he wanted her. She went because she believed in speaking the truth and because curiosity that sticks to the ribs is hard to ignore. The room was pristine, windows showing a city that never paused, and there he sat, no sunglasses now, hair flecked with gray, eyes steady as if they had learned to weigh people against an invisible scale. "We ran a test," he said when it was her turn to stand. "We wanted to know how people treated each other when management looked away." His voice was calm. "You were the only one who stepped in and protected a young man who had nothing to give in return. The owner's reaction to that threatened to make you vanish. That was unacceptable." Garrett Price himself entered the room later that week. He was polite in a way that sounded like a practiced bow. He offered platitudes about policies and the stresses of running a business. He spoke of standards and the importance of maintaining order. When she listened, she could hear the voice that never saw a person, only numbers. She did not tremble when he addressed her. She told the room what happened in a voice that made the plain facts seem like an epic, because the truth of small kindnesses often swells when you tell it out loud. She did not blacken anyone's name with venom. She simply said what she had seen and what she had done and how, when she was pushed, she had tried to keep someone safe. The undercover man had done more than invite her. He brought evidence, cameras from the day before with footage of conversations and acts, interviews with customers who watched and did nothing and some who watched and helped. The footage showed the shove, the shouted word, the napkin clenched in her palm. It showed the manager's hesitation and the owner's later insistence that discipline was necessary. The truth is patient. When it is shown clearly, people are forced to face the small cruelties that hide in plain sight. The city is full of diners and faces. It is not often that a story like hers becomes a headline, but the inspector had a way of piecing small things into a picture large enough for the public to see. Public pressure built. Complaints were filed, emails were written, and local bloggers wrote pieces that took on the flavor of a neighborhood that would not let one of its own be swept away quietly. Investors looked at Garrett Price's businesses with a new lens, and his board began to murmur about reputation and revenue and the weight of perception. One afternoon, Garrett Price requested a private meeting with her. The room felt colder than the diner ever had. He offered a hand that she did not immediately take. He spoke of mistakes and of the difficulty of leadership. He said words about restitution and learning and the need to show the public that his company cared. She listened and then surprised them all by asking for something simple and sensible: her job back pay for the weeks she'd lost, and a promise that staff would be given training on conflict de-escalation and respect. Nothing dramatic, no oversized demand. Just fairness and a chance to keep being who she was. He hesitated, and then, for reasons that were partly public relations and partly a sincere look inward, he agreed. The announcement that followed read like a script designed to soothe. A statement of regret, a pledge to do better, a new community outreach program. Cameras flashed. The headlines blinked. When she returned to the diner, the room smelled the same and different at once. People watched her with the curiosity reserved for someone who had walked into a storm and come out with her head high. The manager who had once sent her to human resources now avoided her glance, but there were other faces. Regulars who clapped softly, co-workers who stood a little straighter, a young kid whose jacket she had steadied with a grateful grin. Money arrived that helped pay overdue bills, but more than that, she had reclaimed something that could not be written on a paycheck. She had reminded a neighborhood and a company that people mattered. The owner's hands might have trembled when he shook hers as cameras recorded, but the tremor belonged to a man who had learned how quickly small things become public. In time, the diner adopted new policies. The manager received training, not humiliation. The investor reports showed minor fluctuations but ultimately steady because customers preferred a brand with heart. The undercover inspector moved on to other places where truth was hiding, leaving behind a town that had learned to notice. She kept working. Her uniform faded the way fabric does when it is loved too often. She smiled more carefully now, with the knowledge that courage need not be loud to be seen. The kid who had been accused of stealing returned one day to thank her in a voice like a promise, saying he had found a job and had stopped skipping classes. People started bringing extra pies sometimes, leaving them in the back to say quietly that they had witnessed goodness.